Hello everyone, welcome to Printable. In this video, we are going to create ID card using Photoshop, and also we'll develop this ID card using HTML and JavaScript. For developing this ID card, we'll be using a library called JSPDF. In our ID card, we'll also have QR code. I'll show you how to integrate the QR code as well. We'll also display the dynamic data inside the ID card. So you can use this ID card to display the data for your employees in your organization. We'll also see some common errors that we can face while creating the ID card, and we'll fix that as well. So let's get started. Open Photoshop and create a new document. Go to print and set the width to 2.125 and height to 3.375 and the resolution to 300 and click create. Now import your logo inside Photoshop, resize it and put it somewhere like this. Now we are going to add name of the company. So I'm going to choose the font Poppins, bold and 9 point, and I'm going to make sure the color is of the logo color. Then I'll write the name of the company. I'll make it uppercase, and to place it at the center, I'll press Ctrl A and go to Move tool and use the horizontal alignment. I'll move the text so that it will look better. I'll press Ctrl J to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to write address in this layer. So I'll remove the uppercase, I'll change the font to medium, and then the font size to 5.5. I'll move the text a little bit upward so that it looks perfect. Now I'll take the rectangle tool and I'll make sure the foreground color is the logo color, and then I'll create a rectangle. I'll transform the rectangle in a way that it looks better. That looks fine for me. Hold Ctrl and select the edge, and then I'll move it downward by holding the Shift key to make a shape something like this. Now let's take a ellipse tool and create a circle like this, and let's change the background color to white. Let's make sure it is also centered by the horizontal alignment. I'll use Ctrl T to transform again and move it little bit upward like this. This looks fine for me. Then I'll press Ctrl J again. I'll change the background color to somewhere like gray, and I'll press Ctrl T to transform it, and I'll resize it so that it looks like some nice border around the circle. I'll add the image within this circle, so I'll go to my image and I'll import it into the Photoshop. Let's click OK. Let's right click and create clipping mask. Let's resize the image so that it fits as we need. That looks fine for me. The outer circle looks little bit larger, so let's press Ctrl T and holding the Alt key, let's resize it little bit. Okay, that looks fine for me. Now let's duplicate these layers. Press Ctrl J, move them upward, press Ctrl T, and let's move it down right here. Let's change the color to white. Let's take the text tool and I'll write the name, and for this one I'll write the designation. Okay, fine. Now I'll duplicate this layer and I'll move it right here. I'll change the alignment to left and I'll change the font size to 6. and I'll again place it somewhere right here. Now I'll change the text. Let's hit enter and write another name. The spacing between the text looks little bit bigger for me, so I'll change the line height to around 12 and place it somewhere right here. Now I'll duplicate this layer, press Ctrl T, and I'll move it a little bit on the right. Maybe that looks fine. I'll remove all the text and I'll add a colon. I'll move the colon little bit on the right. That looks fine. I'll again press Ctrl J to duplicate the layer, and around right here I will add the text. Okay, this looks good for me. Now we need to add the QR code. For that I'm going to create a rectangle. Like this. I'm going to change the background color of the rectangle to white, and I'll place it somewhere right here. Now we need to add the image above the rectangle, so I already have the QR code. If you need the QR code, you can just find the websites online from where you can create and download. I'll just import the QR code into the Photoshop. I'll resize and place it above the rectangle. Now we are done. We have created the ID card in Photoshop. Now we are going to create the ID card in HTML by using a JavaScript library called JSPDF. So I'll create a new folder and I'll rename it HTML, and I'll open this folder in VS Code. Okay, now I'll create a new file. I'll name it idcard.html, and inside here I'll create a HTML5 document, and then we are going to create an iframe, as we will need this to preview our ID card. I'll give it an ID of ID card preview, and let's give it a title. I'll write some CSS so that we can adjust the width and height of the ID card preview. Now I need to import the library inside our document. When you go to the GitHub link, you can find the script tag. You can copy the code and use it directly as a link. Now we need to write different JavaScript code to generate the ID card, so I'm going to create a new file. Let's link this file. We are going to use Live Server VS Code extension to preview our document into the browser. Now the document is empty, so we cannot see anything. If we go to the GitHub, we can see how we can create the document. Let's copy this. Let's open our scripts.js and start creating our ID card. I'll set the orientation to portrait, and the unit is inch, and the format is 2.125, 3.375. Let's add a simple text into the document. Now let's add a code to preview our document within our iframe. This will display our document within the iframe, but we see nothing. Let's see the console. JSPDF is not defined. To fix that, we have to make the JSPDF class available within the window object. Now we can see our document has been loaded. Now we can start creating our ID card. First of all, we can add our logo. Since our logo will not be changed with the dynamic data, in JS PDF we have to save the images as base64 to use inside the document. So we are going to export our logo as a base64 and store it, and then we can use it inside our document. I'll create a new file. I'll link this script. In this file, I'll store all the base64 URLs that I'll need in my ID card. Let's create a logo URI. We need the URI, base64 URI of the logo. We can generate the base64 of our image with this website. I have resized the logo to 300 by 300. I'll drag this image inside the website, and when I click show code, then I'll get the base64 and I can copy it to clipboard. I'll add the base64 for the logo URI. I will delete this line and I'll add the image. The add image method takes the first argument is the base64 URI. So I'll write the logo URI, and then it takes the position X and Y, and then width and height of the image. So to get that, we can use the Photoshop document. Let's zoom in a little bit. Press Ctrl T within the logo and make sure you have the info enabled in your Photoshop. If you don't have, you can go to window and you can click on info. This will help us to measure the dimensions of different images and text that we need. So if we see here, the width and height will be 0.51 and 0.51. Let's set the width and height. The X and Y position are also here. Now the logo seems perfect. Now let's add the text. Since we are using the custom fonts, we need to add those fonts within the JS PDF. If we check the documentation, we can add our custom fonts by converting our TTF file into base64. In my Windows, I'll go to fonts folder and I'll find the fonts. Since we are going to use the bold and the medium font, I'll copy these and I'll paste it right here. Since the type of the font is OTF and not the TTF, we need to convert it to TTF. We can find online OTF to TTF converter, and we can drag and drop our file and we can click on convert. We can delete the other fonts. Now you can convert your TTF file into base64. We can find the online converter. So I'll drag and drop the bold font into the choose file option. I'll copy the base64 generated for the bold font of Poppins. And within this folder, I'll first uncheck the old wrap. Now I'll create a new constant and put the base64. Again, for the medium font, I'll do the same. Once I have done that, I'll go to the scripts and then we can add the fonts to our document. Let's add it right here. So to add the font, we need to give the name for the font. And here the base64. And then we need to define the type of the font. So the name will be same. And the name of the font will be Poppins and the type will be bold. Now let's do the same for medium font. Alright. Now let's start adding the text. We need to add the name of the company. So let's click on the name of the company, and when we go to character, we can see the font size, the text is uppercase, and the text alignment is center. First of all, let's set the font size. Now let's set the font and the type. You can find all these methods in the documentation. We need to align the name of the company at the center, and to center align the text, as you can see, we need to pass the x and y values, and then the null parameters, and then the alignment. Since the y position of the text is calculated based upon the bottom of the text, we can create a guide at the bottom to measure the position of the text. So the y position will be the height 0.733. Then we can pass null, and then the alignment, that is center. And for the x position will be from the center of our document, so it will be 1.0625. Let's save it and let's preview it. This looks good. Also, one more thing, the color of our text is this, so I'll copy the code. Let's define another variable and store our color code within it so we can reuse it. Okay, that looks good. Now we can add the address. For that, we need to define the font size and the font weights. If we take a look at the address, the size is 5.5 and the weight is medium. So let's copy both of these and let's set the font to medium and the font size to 5.5. Now we can also copy this text. Instead of this, we'll write the address. X position will be the same, but we'll measure the y position. The y position will be 0.843. This looks good. Now we need to create the background shape. In JS PDF, we can create rectangles, triangles, but it is a bit difficult to create such polygons. We have two options. Either we can export this background as an image, or we can combine two different shapes to create this design. First of all, I will clear the guides. Here, I can split this design into two sections. The first part is the triangle and the second part is the rectangle. Now, let's create a triangle. Before creating a triangle, we need to set the fill color to primary color. Now, the triangle takes the 3 points. We can calculate the position of the 3 points. First point will be 0,1.68. Similarly, the second point will be the width of the document and 1.18. And the third point will also be the width of the document and 1.68. And we also need to define that we are going to create this shape as a fill color. Now if we take a look, we can see the triangle. Now let's create the rectangle. The rectangle in JS PDF takes a point as an argument, and then width and height of the rectangle. So if we take a look, we can use this point, that is the same as the first point of the triangle, and then width and height. The width will be the same as the width of the document, and the height will be 1.697. And we also need to define the type of shape, that is fill. Now we have created the shape. Now let's create the circle for the profile. For that, let's set the fill color to white and let's create a circle. The circle takes 3 arguments: the position x and y, and the radius, and the type of fill, that is either fill or stroke. So for the x and y position, that is the center of the circle, that will be the center of our ellipse. So let's press Ctrl T and create guides so that we can find the center of our circle. Let's also create one more guide so that we can also calculate the radius. Now let's find the center of the circle, that is 1.063 and 1.447. Now for the radius, we can measure this with 0.473. This is looking good. Now we need to add an image. Since in JS there is no options to clip an image inside the circle, we are going to directly create the image that is already clipped within the circle. Since the image of the employee will need to be dynamic, we need to create a method that will convert the image into base 64. Let's create a new method, and this method will return the promise. So let's create a sync function. This method will take 3 arguments. First of all, URL, then the display width and display height of the image. Now we will return the new promise. Let's create a new image, and now we have 2 methods: image onload, that will be called when the image will be loaded, and another image on error, and this one will be called when there is an error loading the image. And finally, we can set the source of the image to the URL. When the image is loaded, we'll resolve the base 64 of the image, and when there will be an error, we'll resolve an empty image. So to create an empty image, we can just get the base 64 of 1 pixel PNG image, and then we can use it. We can search for 1 pixel PNG base 64. Maybe we need to change the color to full transparent, and this is the 1 pixel transparent base 64 code. So we can copy this and let's define it within base 64 URIs. Empty image. Okay, so in case of error, we can resolve the empty image so that even if we have error in the image, we'll still be displaying our ID card without image. So when the image is loaded, then we are going to create a canvas element where we will be drawing our image. Now we'll need to create a context, and now let's draw the image. We'll pass the image and then the X and Y position from where we need to draw the image, and then the width and height of the image. The width and height will be equal to the width and height that will receive in the parameter. This will create our image within the format of our width and height, but we need the image to be circle. So to clip our image, let's set the global composition operation to destination in so that we can clip our image within a path. Let's set the fill style to a black color. Now let's start the path. Now we need to create an arc. And then we need to fill the path. Now this will create our image within a circle. Now we can export our canvas to data URL and resolve it. Let's get the data URL for the profile image. We need to pass the path, width and height. First of all, let's copy our image, create a new folder called image, and let's put our image inside here. So the path will be image/profile.png, and then let's give it a width of 400 by 400 so that when we give the larger image size, we'll have the better quality of the image. Since it is our sync function, we can use await and then dot add image profile URI, and then we need to find the X and Y position and width and height. So for the image, let's press Ctrl T. Here in the info tab, we can see the width and height 0.86, X and Y position, and so X and Y position will be 0.633 and 1.015. So we have an error. Await is only valid in async function. So we have await and we don't have a function. So what we can do is we can wrap all this code inside a function, and let's name it generate ID card, and then we need to call this function. Let's call this function within our HTML. Okay, now let's save it. Nice. We have also loaded our circular image and it is already looking great. Now we need to add the name of the employee and the designation. So for that, we can just copy all of this and let's paste it right here. So instead of primary color, we are going to choose white, and let's add the name. X position will be the same, but we need to find the Y position. Let's create guide at the bottom of the text, and now let's measure the height 2.15. So the position of the name will be 2.15, and for the designation it will be 2.267. Now let's see how it looks. This is already looking great. Now we need to add the labels and the values for the employee information. So to do that, we can already use the same font, so we don't need to copy that, but we need to change the font size. So the font size of the employee information is 6, and then let's add the text. First of all, add the staff ID. So let's find the X and Y position for the staff ID. The X and Y position will be 0.3 and 2.583. Okay. Now we need to add a colon. Let's find the position for the colon as well. X position will be 0.76 and Y position will be same. For the value, X position will be 0.813 and Y position will be same. Let's save it, but we don't need these to be centered, so let's remove them. Let's save it and let's preview. This is looking great. Now we can copy and paste for all the information of the employee, but instead of doing that, I would like to do by creating an array and then going through the loop to generate for all of them. And now I'll do the same for rest of the information. Now we can look through this data and let's put all of this inside this. Now for each of the data, we need to offset them with certain value, so that will be equal to the spacing between them. So to do that, let's first calculate the spacing between two information, and the height is about 0.167. So what we can do is, instead of the fixed Y position, we can add the spacing and multiply it with the index. So for each of them, we'll do the same. So let's save it and let's preview. This is already looking great. We just need to replace the labels and the value. So it will be like item.label, and then it will be item.value. Yes, great. This is already looking great. Now we need to add the QR code. So to add the QR code, first of all, we are going to create a rectangle, and to create rectangle, we are going to measure the dimension and the position. So let's press Ctrl T and let's see the width and height. We need to create a rectangle. So dot rect, and then the X and Y position and the width and height. So the X and Y position will be 1.578, 2.846. Okay, great. And then the width and height 0.433, 0.433, and the type will be filled. So let's see how it looks. Looking great. Since we already had the fill color of white, we don't need to repeat the step for this rectangle. Now we can add the image, but for that we need to generate the QR code dynamically. To generate the QR code, we are going to use a library called QR code.js. So I'm going to use the CDN for this library. I'm going to copy the CDN and I'll add it right here. Now I'll go to scripts.js and I'll create another method. This time I'm not going to create a async function, as we don't need that. I'll just create a function. Here we'll receive the text that we need to generate with the QR code. If we see the documentation of the QR code, we can just use this code to create the QR code. For creating the QR code, instead of get element by ID, we are just passing the container, and then for the text we are going to pass this text. This QR code method generates the canvas element, so we can use the canvas element to convert it into the data URL and return it back as we did for the image. We can return this. Now let's get back to our code and then const QR code URI is equal to get QR code URI, and then here we will pass the text that we need for QR code. So for QR code we'll need this staff ID, so I'm going to pass this staff ID, and then let's see if this is working correctly. If we are getting a base 64, go to the document. I'm getting the base 64 as needed. This is looking great. And now I'll add an image to the document. The image data will be QR code URI, and I need the X and Y position and the width and height. So for that, let's get back to the Photoshop and let's select this QR and press Ctrl T. X and Y position 1.613, 2.882, and then the width and height will be 0.366. Now let's check. Nice, this is almost complete. We have created a nice looking ID card, and then we can use this for printing the ID card as well, but we don't have the download button. Let's try creating the download button as well. For that, I'll go to the HTML, and below the iframe I'll add a button, and when the button is clicked, add the onClick function, and let's name it download ID card. So we need to create this function within our scripts.js. Let's create another function. Now, to be able to download the ID card, we need to have access to the document. Since the document is within another function, we cannot access it inside this function. So instead of defining only within that function, maybe we can store it into the global variable. So let's create another variable. Let's say doc, and then within our function, instead of setting as const, we'll replace the doc with the new instance of JSPDF, and here inside download ID card we can access this global doc variable, and if the doc is available, then we'll say doc.save. Okay, now let's try it. Let's refresh. Let's click on download and let's save it and click open. Nice, this is looking great. Now we need to display the dynamic data from an array of employees. We'll see if we have different images that are not in square format, then how can we adjust those images as well. Here I have created the list of employees that we can display in our ID card. So I'd like to fetch this JSON file. Now if we go to the generate ID card function, now we can receive the data, and now we can generate the ID card for all the employees by using a for loop. As you already know that creating a new object, adding fonts, this will not require to be done in every ID card generation. So we'll leave those code above and then we'll create a for loop from here. Let's put all the code up to here. We don't need to set preview inside for loop. And then let's save this and let's see how it looks. Since we are not generating the multiple pages, it's overwriting over the same page. So what we need to do, we need to add the page, but we need to add the page only from the second page and not for the first page. So we are going to add page on the top after this first page. So what we can do, if the index is greater than 0, then we can add the page like this. Once we do that, we get the list of ID cards as we need. Now we can display all the dynamic data that is inside the employee variable. So we don't need to change the name and address. We can change the image. To change the image, we have image property, and then for the name we have employee.name, but we need to change the text to uppercase, so to uppercase. Now we can replace the designation. Let's save it and preview it. Oh, we have error, invalid argument text, so something is wrong. Okay, we have error that failed to execute data URL and canvas element. So there is an issue with image loading because we are referencing the image from the external URL. To solve this issue, we need to set the cross origin. Okay, great. Now we can see all the dynamic data. So everything looking fine except the image. The images are not displayed properly. They are squashed for certain images that doesn't have the square height and width. So we need to fix that. So the way we can do that is by maintaining the aspect ratio while resizing the images. So for that, let's first calculate the aspect ratio of the original image. Let's define other variables. Let img width is equal to display width, and let img height equals to display height. So we are going to use this img width and img height for setting the width and height of the image. Since our canvas is already going to be the exact same as the width and height that we need to display, but our image that is need to be resized will be scaled based upon the aspect ratio. So we'll be changing the image width and image height based upon the aspect ratio. So let's say if aspect ratio is greater than 1, aspect ratio is the ratio of width by height. So it's gonna be either greater than 1 or equal to 1 or less than 1. If it's greater than 1, that means the width is greater than the height. So if the width is greater than the height, we need to set the height to the fixed value. That is, the height will be equal to the display height, but we need to update the width. So img width will be equal to the display width multiplied by aspect ratio. So for the else case, if the height is greater than the width, then the width will be fixed and we need to update the height. So the image height will be display height Bluetooth 1 by aspect ratio, or we can simply write it as display height divided by aspect ratio. Okay. Now we have scaled the image width and height based upon the aspect ratio, but the position of the image needs to be fixed as well. So for that, for the X position, the position of the image will be resized width minus the display width that we need to put divide by 2, the half of this value, and we need to shift the position to the negative axis. And for the height as well, let's save it and let's have a look at it. Nice. As you can see, all the images now are maintained with the aspect ratio and all of them are looking good. Let's download the PDF and let's check the PDF as well. Let's zoom in. Great. So don't worry about this line because it only shows when we zoom, and when printing this there will be no problem. So you can just use this and print it as an ID card. So in this way you can generate ID cards for many employees in your organization. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.